The Maternal Thread by C.J. Van Pletzen. Ashes in the Congo. Léopoldville was hotter when Uri'el and Samuel returned, and quieter. But not the quiet of peace. It was the quiet of streets that had been washed in blood. Patrice Lumumba had been arrested. Rumors said Belgian officers were flying him east to Katanga. Others whispered that his fate was already sealed in a shallow grave. The CIA claimed they were protecting Western interests. The Soviets called it murder. To Uri'el, it was the sound of history repeating itself. Empires did not vanish. They just changed the flag on the pole. A city under siege. They kept to the edges of the city, slipping like shadows between market alleys where mud walls sagged inward, their plaster cracked by rain and neglect. Léopoldville breathed uneasily, as if the whole capital were a single chest caught between inhalation and release. The river ran swollen and brown at its edge, carrying the scent of silt and decay. But the streets above it carried silence, thick, strained, the kind of silence that comes before eruption. Posters of Lumumba's face peeled from walls, flapping like torn scripture in the night breeze. Some bore streaks of dried blood, handprints pressed as though men had tried to hold the image in place, even as soldiers tore it down. Others were plastered over with French slogans promising order words that rang hollow, slogans printed with ink but written in gunpowder. Women walked with baskets balanced on their heads, their eyes lowered, as if the dust itself were dangerous to meet. Men clustered in knots no larger than 3, their voices kept to a whisper, their gazes darting toward corners where shadows might hide informants. Even the dogs that haunted the alleys seemed subdued, tails low, their usual barks replaced by watchful silence. Uri'el walked with his collar raised, Zuriel's words echoing in his memory like a psalm he could not unlearn. The world does not change, it rebrands. He felt the truth of it now in every shuttered window, in every uniformed patrol that passed like clockwork ghosts. Flags changed, languages shifted, leaders rose and fell, but the hands that pulled the strings remained the same, foreign, unseen, patient as vultures circling heat-shimmered air. Samuel walked at his side, his long stride unbroken despite the tension. He muttered as they crossed through a deserted marketplace where fruit lay rotting in half-abandoned stalls, skins collapsing inward like faces hollowed by famine. The air itself feels guilty. Uri'el nearly smiled, though the heaviness of the city resisted it. Samuel always found words to cut the silence, a way of drawing thin light into corners that even lamps could not reach. Yet Uri'el knew Samuel's quips were not jest, but truth sharpened. The Congo had declared itself free, yet its air, its stones, its people seemed chained by something deeper, history itself, perhaps, or bloodlines cursed to repeat their patterns. The reliquary they had delivered to Kasa-Vubu only days before was already gone, ferried eastward through channels invisible to the world, smuggled into the Brotherhood's hidden arteries, carried toward a sanctuary neither of them had ever seen. But both knew existed. That task was finished, but Uri'el could feel it in his marrow. There was more. With Zuriel, there was always more. The man had trained them to expect it, to sense the weight of the next summons before it was spoken. The name in the photograph. The summons came in the shape of a warehouse near the port, its corrugated tin roof sagging under the humidity, its windows opaque with soot. Inside, a single lantern hissed, throwing pale light across stacked crates that smelled of salt and mildew. Kasa-Vubu waited there. He was a wiry man, his frame built from both hunger and endurance. Prison cells had carved hollows into his cheeks, and coups had painted lines around his eyes. But the fire within them had not dimmed. Exhaustion and flame lived there together, an impossible marriage sustained only by necessity. He wasted no time with greetings. Without a word, he slid a sealed envelope across the rough wood of the table. His hand lingered on it a moment, as though the paper itself were dangerous. Uri'el took it, feeling the weight of something more than paper inside. Samuel leaned close, the dampness of the port air clinging to their clothes. Uri'el broke the seal. Inside was a single black and white photograph, grainy with the imperfections of a cheap lens. A cluster of men stood before a UN Land Rover, rifles slung, their uniforms stiff, their posture more rigid than relaxed, their faces blurred, anonymous except one. One figure stood slightly apart, shoulders squared as if claiming command without words. His pale eyes, even blurred by the poor photograph, pierced through the haze like shards of winter sky. Uriel's stomach dropped, his breath pausing in his chest. "Name's Renard," Kasa-Vubu said. His voice was low, flat, as though even uttering it carried risk. "Katanga's new security chief, force publique before independence. He burned villages then to bury rumors. Now he burns them to erase trails." Uriel's jaw tightened. His voice came out sharper than intended. "Whose trail?" Kasa-Vubu leaned forward, his shadow spilling across the photograph. "Yours." Samuel swore softly under his breath. "The mercenary from the brewery he lived." Kasa-Vubu's nod was like a final nail driven into wood. Renard was his commander, and Renard once wore the same Legion banner as Zuriel. For a moment, Uriel felt the air thicken, the weight of generations pressing against his chest. The Legion again. The same banner that had cast his grandfather across Europe and Africa, a shadow that seemed never to loosen its grip. Blood, banners, betrayal, the triad that bound their family like chains. It reached even here, in the heart of a Congo supposedly reborn. His thoughts turned inward, spiraling like smoke. How many wars does one bloodline carry? How many uniforms can a single curse wear before it is spent? He remembered Zuriel's silence at the vineyard, the unspoken truths that lived in his eyes. The old man had known this thread would find them. Perhaps he had even counted on it. Kasa-Vubu's voice pulled him back. "Renard has something. A packet taken off a courier in Angola. I believe it was meant for you." Uri'el and Samuel exchanged a glance. It was the kind of glance that required no words, the kind Zuriel had trained them for. Recognition of another path, another test, another fragment of the map that pulled them ever deeper. Uriel's chest tightened. He looked again at the photograph. Renard's pale eyes stared back across the paper, across distance, across bloodlines. The air in the warehouse seemed to contract. Another relic awaited, another trial called. And this time, the ghost of the Legion walked with them,